You're at university and you want a successful side gig as a teacher for people in the year below or online, but you're not too sure how to teach, or maybe you just want to teach better. After all, better you are at teaching, more students you're going to get, therefore more money you're going to be making. Well, you're in the right place to find out how to do exactly that. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Shane and I'm a recently qualified doctor and I've been supervising neuroscience at Cambridge University for the past 3 years. Over that time, I've used the evidence-based techniques that I'm going to be talking about today to help me have a better impact on students' learning, but at the same time, I've also managed to use that to apply for more jobs, more colleges, and I've supervised over 5 different colleges at the university. So the techniques that I'm going to be talking about today are very high impact and backed with strong, solid evidence, often meta-analytic evidence. What that means is this looks at research evidence and data across numerous different studies, compiles them together and sees how large the effect size is. So in terms of scientific evidence, this is one of the highest level of evidence we can see. So basically you can be very confident that all these techniques are high impact and backed with good solid research. I like to think of all these techniques in actually 3 categories. The first few I'm going to talk about are going to do with clarity and improving clarity for your students. The next few are going to be to do with engagement and increasing engagement with the students, and the last few are going to be to do with reinforcement and enhancing learning. And at the very end, I'll talk about strategies that we can kind of leverage all these techniques to help us earn a little bit more money whilst we're at the good deed of helping students learn better. So the first thing to talk about is exam-focused objectives. One of the key things that can set you apart from other tutors is your ability to sieve out all these unnecessary information and detail and go to what is examinable content and material. That's often what students actually want from their tutors, to actually tell them what's the kind of, oh, it's there for interest, not really too important, and what's the absolutely necessary examinable material. And this type of teaching and actually defining what's important at the beginning and setting these exam-focused objectives has been backed up by research to show it has a massive impact in student performance. So for example, in the book Visible Learning by John Hattie, which looks at over 800 meta-analyses to do with achievement, it found that exam-focused objectives had an effect size of 0.75. Statistically speaking, effect sizes refers to how large is the difference between one group and another. An effect size of about 0.2 is considered to be quite small, 0.5 is around medium, and 0.7 or 0.8 is considered to be quite large. So you can see that an effect size of 0.75 is actually quite drastic, so definitely by setting these exam-focused objectives right from the beginning of your lesson, it can massively improve student performance. So the next thing to talk about is concept mapping. So what's concept mapping? Well, concept mapping is essentially providing the big picture. Often lectures and teaching material, lessons are delivered in kind of random orders. Often it's not in a way that's logical and it fits in, which means it's very difficult for students to figure out what the big picture is. And they often get lost in the nitty-gritty details. It is difficult for a lot of people to just sit back and appreciate the big picture. But if you can provide that right from the beginning by carrying out something like concept mapping, it's really going to improve the student's performance. For example, research by Noah Schroeder, which looked at loads of different studies that used concept maps, found that there was an effect size of 0.6. And like I mentioned, an effect size of around 0.5 is medium and an effect size of 0.8 is quite large. So 0.6 is fairly sizable. So now we know that providing this big picture and providing a concept map can actually improve student performance by a large amount. But how can we practically use this? Well, concept mapping essentially involves looking at all the big topics. You can circle them visually, and then you can kind of branch off into the different subtopics and see how they're related to the main topic, but also related to each other. And by providing this kind of almost a diagram, it allows the students to appreciate this big picture view. Okay, so the next thing to talk about are visual aids. This one is fairly obvious, I think. Imagine watching this video without kind of any text popping up or any swooshing in of different images. It would be pretty dry and it'll be very difficult for you to actually get some of the point. Equally, in your lessons, students can find it very difficult to actually understand what you're going on about if you don't use visual aids and diagrams, graphs, etc. And again, this is backed up with solid evidence too. Research by Paul Gins has found a significant improvement in student performance with the use of auditory and visual aids. I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, I was supervising some of my neuroscience students and we were talking about this concept of endowment effect. That's essentially when you own something, you tend to value it more than if you didn't own something. So the kind of idea is, if I had a chocolate bar and a mug and I surveyed, let's say 100 people, 50% of those people, or 50 people, would prefer the chocolate and the other 50 would prefer the mug. So if I gave a mug to 50 of those people and I asked them, do you want to switch to a chocolate bar, you'd expect about 25 of them to switch over to the chocolate bar. But actually you see that the majority of the people tend to hold on to whatever thing that they have, in this case the mug. So fewer than 25 actually switch over to the chocolate. And this is called the endowment effect, and this is due to the way that we subjectively value things. It's due to diminishing sensitivity to gains and losses being steeper than gains. That's very difficult to understand and grasp with just words that I've said. But if I now show you the diagrams and actually allow you to see what I mean when I'm talking about diminishing sensitivity, concave graph shape, and if you can actually visualize the mug and the chocolate bar, your appreciation of the actual analogy and your ability to understand the example is much greater. So it goes without saying that the use of visual aids is massively going to enhance your teaching and improve student learning. Right, so next, worked examples. This again is a way of improving clarity for the students by showing them exactly how something works and allowing them to participate and see what they understand, what they don't understand, and how you can improve things. For example, if I was teaching my students about something called the Nernst equation, I could literally just tell them about it and say, okay, go away and learn it. Another way is to actually give them a problem that involves different numbers and figures, and I tell them, okay, how would we apply to this Nernst equation? I might initially do one question and show them how I would apply it, and then we might work through another question, but in this stage I might just do the first 1 or 2 steps and then ask them to complete the rest. And then in the third example I might ask them to start straight away and do the whole example themselves. So this type of faded worked example tends to work really well in allowing students to understand this is how something works and this is how I can apply the knowledge that I've gained into a real exam question. And again, this concept of worked examples improving student performance is backed up with solid research. For example, research by Jennifer Chrisman from the University of Nebraska has found that the use of these faded worked examples massively improves student performance. Right, so let's now talk about some things that enhance engagement, and the first one being questioning. So this is the concept of actually directing questions to your students. Maybe that's in a group, or maybe it's just one student. So, you know, tutoring and supervising or teaching in kind of small groups or just one-to-one is very different to lectures. In a lecture, you essentially go to one person, loads and loads of people that go to them, right? And they essentially end up talking to a massive group of people and just telling them content and information. Maybe they answer 1 or 2 questions at the end, but that's about it. In a tutor kind of setting, in a small group teaching setting, the tutor's role is to actually go beyond that and check someone's understanding and see what their strong points are, what their weaknesses are, and how things can be improved. So you can't just kind of sit there and read through the lecture material or just talk at them for the whole time. And to be honest, at the very beginning, when I first started doing this, I kind of fell into this trap because I was very cautious about not saying the right thing, so I felt really scared to just kind of go off script, to go off the lecture material and just kind of say, you know, look at everyone and say, okay, can you tell me about this, can you tell me about that? It was more a case of, you know, I was almost re-delivering the lecture, which isn't useful. So then I decided, you know what, let's switch this tactic of questioning people. And again, this is backed up with good meta-analytical evidence that shows that questioning students directly helps to improve their understanding, allows them to realize their strengths, their weaknesses, and actually helps them realize what they didn't even know that they didn't know. Because often, you know, I might start at the beginning of a supervision and say, what are the things that you found tricky? And they kind of just look at me blankly, not really sure what they actually don't know. But then when we go into this method of questioning and I'm directing questions to one person, then another, then we start to realize actually what they thought they knew, they're not too sure on. And we can work on that throughout the whole tutoring process, and that has a massive improvement in student performance later down the line. And this kind of questioning sets them up quite nicely for exams because they're already used to being out of their comfort zone and they're already used to getting these questions kind of barraged at them and delivered to them. So the next thing is feedback. This is probably one of the most important things that you can do for your students. It allows them to realize where they're at, what they can improve on, and what they can work on. So it's very, very good to provide effective feedback. Now, providing feedback isn't just telling them, okay, no, you're wrong, and moving on. It's a case of constructive criticism, right? You know, everyone appreciates that's what we like to hear. No one likes to be told they're wrong. People like to hear, this is something that we can improve on, and this is how we can do that. So whenever I'm delivering feedback, I always kind of use this three-prong approach. One is to actually tell them where they're at objectively. And then secondly, acknowledging what they've done well. And thirdly, I'll provide them with about 3 to 5 points of things that they can improve or things they can do in order to improve their overall score or their overall essay style or the way that they do their equations, etc. Again, this concept of providing effective feedback in improving student performance is backed up with good meta-analytical evidence. Now, let's talk about productive group work. This really only applies if you are teaching kind of groups of students instead of just one at a time. So essentially, all you do is you instigate the conversation, you instigate the discussion, maybe you ask a question, whatever, and then you essentially sit back and observe how the group members discuss things. Often, some people know the answers to things, or some people come up with questions which the other students can answer. So instead of you jumping in and answering it for them, you ask, does anyone else know the answer to this? And then, you know, another student might have a go at explaining it. And if it's correct, you acknowledge that it was correct, and then you move on to the next topic. But in this way, it allows students to communicate between each other and practice teaching to enhance their own learning. As we all know, teaching is one of the best ways to actually increase or enhance learning and retention of concepts and points. And also this allows you to kind of sit back and actually check everyone's understanding at the same time, because if someone's asking a question on it, it shows that actually maybe they're not too sure on it. And if someone else gives an answer, then if it's correct, then you can be confident that that person knows it, and then you check the understanding of the other individuals. But in fact, if the person who tries to give an answer, if it's not too right, then you can jump in and actually give a more global view and spend more time on that topic. So that's one way of kind of achieving productive group work. Another way is to actually have this task that has multiple steps, and you assign a step per student. So I don't know, when we're doing like a graph on the board, I might ask them, okay, one person, Bob, can you go and do the graph axis and label it? And then I might ask Stephanie to go up and draw the actual graph and label what the lines show. Both these techniques have been shown by solid research that it enhances learning and retention. So now let's talk about evidence-based techniques that enhance reinforcement, one of which is practice. So this refers to the idea of providing them with opportunities to apply the knowledge that they have just learnt. So I often present that in a kind of exam-focused or exam-oriented way. For example, in neuroscience, which is a subject I teach, we do short answer questions. So at the end of a supervision, you might ask the students to answer 1, 2 of these questions. By actually observing them do the questions, you are right there to give active feedback to them and see, okay, this is correct, or they can ask you on the spot, I'm not too sure what this question means, or I'm not too sure what it's asking, etc. But what it's doing is allowing them to have an opportunity to apply their knowledge directly to an exam-focused question. Then you might set them some work that expands on the questions that we've done at the end of the supervision. So it's like spacing out their practice. Essentially, like spaced repetition has shown to enhance learning, retention, and memory. And of course, it helps them realize what are examinable facts and how do all these facts get asked in an exam. The final point is graphical summarisation. This kind of borrows from concept mapping and visual aids. Kind of present all the information that we've learnt in that lesson in a visual summary to allow the students to realise, okay, so this is how the things that I learnt fit together, and this is the big picture. So it's essentially like providing the concept mapping with the use of visual aids, but providing at the end to reinforce what they've learned throughout the whole lesson. And again, doing this has been shown by research to enhance learning, retention, memory, and student performance. Right, so now let's talk about ways in which we can optimize our earning. By actually employing these evidence-based techniques, you're obviously going to see a big improvement in your student performance. And you're also going to see an actual enjoyment in student learning, and they can actually engage and feel like they're learning better with you than with their other tutors and their other supervisors. And you can objectively record that by giving feedback forms to the students and kind of say, do you mind filling this in, and answer honestly. You collect this feedback forms and you now have an objective record of how good your teaching is. You can leverage this to actually apply to more jobs and therefore get more money because you have more jobs. Or you can actually charge a little bit more money per hour, because you can say, you know what, I'm actually a fantastic supervisor or a fantastic tutor. You can see that all of my students are objectively performing at this level, and this is how they feel about their tutoring, etc, etc. But this kind of really depends on the kind of way you are carrying out tutoring and supervising. At Cambridge, the supervisions that I do, they're a fixed rate. It doesn't matter if you're a fantastic supervisor or a rubbish one. But other avenues, other websites that allow you to tutor directly, they allow you to set your own benchmark and own per hour, etc. So if you are going to do that, you need to objectively justify why you charge more than the other tutor or other supervisor. And having these objective evidence to show this is why I'm doing it can be very helpful in allowing you to charge a bit more. Another way to enhance your earning opportunity is to actually provide a key skill that isn't often found. One of which is actually essay writing and essay marking. So this is something that not many people know how to do very well. And if you're interested in enhancing your earning by actually learning this key skill and actually providing it to the students, then definitely do check out the video that I have on essay writing and actually being able to provide this skill meaningfully to the students. So hopefully you guys can now start applying this to your teaching sessions, helping you get more jobs, more students, more hours, but also having a meaningful impact on your student work. If you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. But that's it from me for today, and I'll see you guys next time.